Let me say it here before you enter the Toy Talks podcast episode. Colin Kaepernick is a mixed race, biracial man. He is not a black man. He decided to put a black woman on the front cover of his book in the manner that he did to centre us black women as a sacrifice on the front line of his cause. It is violent, dangerous and irresponsible. Black women are not human shields. And that was an Instagram post by me, Toy Washington, and it was a prelude to this episode, which I have called On the Front Line of Sacrifice. All of us are aware of who Colin Kaepernick is, and he polarised and centred himself in protesting against police brutality and racism by taking the knee during the national anthem in the US. So very recently, Colin Kaepernick released the cover of a book that he is about to release, and on that cover is a black woman. He has named this book Abolition for the People, the Movement for a Future Without Policing and Prisons, and on that front cover is a black woman, and a black woman who is clearly protesting and is holding up a sign that says abolish the police, close the prisons, and then in her other hand she has over 30 voices for the people. It's like a newspaper. And a lot of people had been telling me, go and have a look at the cover of this book. And I hadn't gotten to it. And I can't remember what happened. And I was really triggered by the cover of this book. But we're going to get into all of that. I'm going to unpack it. We're going to talk about it because we are always, as black women, on the front line. We are caping for black men. We are often on the front line of sacrifice. But I think in order for us to really deep kind of the cover that Colin Kaepernick commissioned, approved and has uploaded on his Instagram, for us to really deep dive into it, we need to unpack a bit about him and how he has centered himself as a voice for black people. But we're going to get into that. I can't start this podcast episode without asking you all to put our beautiful black queen, Sistah Johnson, who is a Black Lives Matter activist, who was shot in the head this weekend. Sistah has done amazing things for the Black Lives Matter movement. She has been a voice for the Black Lives Matter movement, a voice for black women. And I just ask all of us to hold her up in prayer as she fights for her life. And as the story emerges about what actually happened, I think what we need to hold in our minds is how precious Sistah Johnson is as a beautiful black queen, but also how she has given so selfishly to a movement to benefit us. So please, 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 in your prayers, keep Sistah Johnson in your prayers, and we ask that God continues to give her covering as she fights for her life. Oh, that was heavy. So I know a lot of you have been probably thinking, Toy, you've been really quiet on social media in this last week. What's been going on? So before we get into the meat of the episode, I want to talk a little bit because I feel as though even though I teach, educate and guide you how to navigate the world of work, I need to give us grace to be tired. I need to give myself grace to be tired. Because as we navigate white spaces, white people, non-black people, in systems that are racist, overtly, covertly, it is really exhausting. It's exhausting to have to be strategic. It's exhausting to have to be on 10 toes, to go toe to toe with people who do not want to see us merely because of the colour of our skin or because of our gender or both. And you know what? I'm fucking tired. I am tired. And I think that this rhetoric of being a strong black woman, which I think is a very dangerous narrative, it doesn't allow us to humanize our emotions, i.e. it doesn't allow us to feel tired without feeling guilt or feeling like we shouldn't be because we are too busy trying to keep up appearances of being strong. And actually, saying you're tired doesn't make you any less strong. It just makes us human. We are humans. But yet society depicts us and takes away and erases, number one, black women and emotions, and then erases us and what we are fighting for. And I'm really just tired. And I found myself being extremely exhausted with having to navigate white people. And I'm working in a white dominated industry, in a white dominated organization. And I definitely feel as though, and I've told you guys, the higher the level, the higher the devil. We have a podcast episode entitled that as well. But also as well, I think sometimes when we are just being strategic and we are navigating, and quite successfully, we don't give ourselves grace to step back and say, actually, today I'm just going to be in my feelings and I'm just going to be in my space. I'm not going to participate in this for today. I want to give myself grace. And actually, I felt like that over the last few days. Today, I just was like, I don't feel like doing work today. So I messaged my boss, I was like, I'm not doing work today. I said to her, I'm absolutely exhausted. And she never questioned it. She was fine. And it just made me think about, as I'm teaching you guys and I'm giving you examples, I'm giving you the strategies, I don't know if I've actually told you guys to take time for yourself. And I apologize if I haven't done that. But I think partly it's because I don't give myself time. I don't give myself enough grace, because it is fucking exhausting. And it is okay to say it's exhausting. It doesn't make you any less as a participant in the navigation of work. Actually, it's just a confirmation that sometimes it does take a lot out of us. And I think we expend a lot of emotional, psychological and spiritual energy having to navigate white spaces. And you have to understand, from my perspective, I'm triggered all the time as well, because I have this beautiful platform that you guys have given to me to teach and guide. And I get approached by organizations, I get recommendations. And then I'm triggered when I do my due diligence on those organizations as well, because often how they center specifically black women is also quite triggering. And then you have to, or I have to, work out how to communicate this to an organization in a language they are going to understand without changing who I am, and being intentional about them understanding that this is unacceptable in the way they polarize black women in such negative connotations. What do I mean by that? Okay. So a beautiful black queen who's accessed the platform, benefited from the platform, all-round queen, okay? She recommended me to an organisation that she was actually working at, and she's since left for various reasons. And the CEO of that company reached out to me. And to be fair, I get a lot of CEOs, directors, shareholders that do reach out to me on various companies. And before I decide to work with any organisation, one of the very first things that I do is due diligence, because not all money is good money. Not all money is good money. And in the same way, I'm very, very careful on brands I associate myself with in relation to the Toy Talks platform, is the same way I'm very careful about organisations I work with, because part of my due diligence, and I tell you guys, everything that I teach about the world of work has transferable skills in real life. When you go into organisations, I tell you guys all the time, do your due diligence. When an organisation reaches out to me, I do my due diligence. And I speak to, so in this instance, I was really lucky because this young lady was leaving this organisation, and I asked her a couple of questions, and then I commenced to do my research. And part of my research is understanding the setup of this organisation from a racial equality and diversity perspective. So I'm interested in how many black people they have in their organisations, how many non-black people. I look at shareholders, board members, senior stakeholders, HR. I look at all of that stuff. And then I look at press and communication. So what comms have they put out in relation to black and ethnic minorities? Okay. And then I ask, okay, what comms or press releases were released last summer during the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement? Because if you really want to know the pulse of an organisation, last year's resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement is a great way to gauge where an organisation sits, where they sit in their communication, where they sit in their authenticity, and where they sit in terms of being held accountable for the things that they've said in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Because we know from last summer, a lot of organisations were quite performative. So I need to understand, between your performativeness till today's date, what have you done? And then look at the actual comms that were released. And when I did my due diligence of the comms that were released, before I could get to the second paragraph of the comms, the associated press release had a picture of a young black girl. I'm talking about probably 8, 9 years old, at best 7 or 8, 7, 8, 9. And I was confused. I was like, hang on. In a message about the Black Lives Matter movement, why have you centred an 8-year-old black girl? So we're going to call her 8 years old. Why have you done that? What is it that, why? And it made me uncomfortable. And I realised upon doing like my due diligence that this organisation are tone deaf. And I put it to you that whoever released that comms was not a black person. And my thing is, I recognise when organisations recognise themselves that they need to have a racial equality, diversity consultant to consult them on what they need to do to promote, encourage and plant the seed and then water it and harvest diversity. And the only way that's going to happen is if we have organisations who often, a lot of these organisations are dominated by white people at the top who are the decision makers. Now, if you have a decision maker that reaches out to you, it does show a willingness. And I see it as when they reach out to me, my role is to educate. It's not to condemn. It's not to preach. It is to teach. And I'm not trying to change anyone's mind or change anyone's view, because I understand that white privilege is what white people have been raised to believe and raised to believe that they are part of an elite society of privilege. Do you understand? So who am I to come in and try and change the way people think? I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to teach you that the way you're operating does not work anymore. I'm trying to teach you that if you have an organisation and you're preaching diversity, but you've got no black people that sits in your senior boards or senior members of staff that are influential decision makers, you are not diverse. And racial equality equally does not equate to tokenism. So these are things that I'm having to teach and going to organisations, but I think a lot of organisations don't realise as well that in bringing us in, we are also triggered, and we have to find a way to communicate what we're triggered about while still teaching you and whilst not making it personal. And that is a lot. So when I saw the black girl as in the image of what was published, when we see black girls, we see ourselves, don't we? And in my head, I was like, what are you trying to communicate by centering a young black girl? And it's dangerous because as much as you're centering this young black girl, you are putting her on the front line of your message. And I'm sick and tired of society, of the Colin Kaepernicks of this world, centering black women when it comes to protest, when it comes to sacrifice. But you won't pick us first when it's time for elevation. When you are trying to, look for a partner to settle down with, you ain't picking us first. But you want to pick us first when it's time to protest. You want to pick us first when it's time to put us as your human shields. You want to put us first when it's time for sacrifice. That's when you want to put us first. And this organisation decided to pick a black girl and center her. That is a lot to carry in a message about the Black Lives Matter movement. So my question to that organisation is, why didn't you use the Black Lives Matter symbol, the logo? Why didn't you use that? And I genuinely want to understand why that wasn't chosen. But what was chosen was the centering of a young black girl. And it's like when the people talk about Africa and then they'll go and find something in the archives, right? They'll go and find a picture of a young black child with a fly on its nose by a water well. It's this stereotype of an imagery to push an agenda which is dangerous. And as Black people, this is what's being communicated. And it makes our existence as Black people harder, because we are constantly having to, number one, counsel ourselves through trauma. But equally, it's quite difficult then to have to tell a non-Black person that this is not who Black people are, and this is not Africa, and this is just 1% of what Africa is, or whatever percentage this is. Do you understand? How do you begin to start reconditioning people's mind? That's why I said I'm not here to recondition or convince anyone of anything. I'm here to teach people that the way you are operating is not reflective of the way things should be. Equality, listen, dominance and oppression and equality do not work together. And after a consultation, I can figure out whether I want to work with this organisation or not. Yeah, there's like stage gates. So the first stage gate is the due diligence. The second stage gate is after I do the consultation, how it is received. And I've had businesses reach out to me after a consultation wanting to work with me, and I've had to refer them to someone else because they're not ready to do the work. You're not ready to do the work when you're telling me we'd like you to come in Black History Month in October in the UK and Black History Month in February for the US. That is not actively walking down a journey. That is performative, and I will never be used as an instrumental tool of performative theatrics. And I've told organisations, I've written to them, you will not use me as your token Black consultant for your agenda of theatrics. And you are ridiculing my very existence as a Black woman by trying to communicate to other people that you truly are invested in equality and diversity, because you're only interested in it twice a year. Black History Month in the UK, Black History Month in the US, and that doesn't work for me. There are organisations that I feel like, during the Black Lives Matter movement last year and the resurgence of it last year, we've let a lot of organisations off the hook because they've been allowed to be performative. They've been a bit of uproar, and then we go straight back to spending money in those stores. I, for one, since last year, Black Lives Matter resurgence, I have not spent any money with Pretty Little Thing. Nope. And I wait for Pretty Little Thing to come back, and I will tweet them in the summer. A year on, where have you progressed from your performative post and press releases? And I think we need to start, and I've always said it, and I am ashamed to say that we need to start, because we should already be doing it, is holding organisations accountable for piggybacking off a movement that has meant so much to us and has opened so much dialogue purely just to make money from us. And this is why I intentionally spend Black. I always look in my community first. When I need to buy something, I need to purchase something, I always look in my community first. And then I look at other ethnic minorities, and I hate the word ethnic minorities, but you know what I mean, other ethnic minority communities. And then I will look, if I can't find it, then I will look further afield. But spending Black is so important, and I realised it last year when our spending power, we were caused to question it and its strength because of how organisations were treating us and how business were treating us. We've just gone back to how shit was before because we're not holding them accountable. And my thing is, if we don't hold businesses accountable and start seeing the strength in the Black pound, how are we going to hold organisations and businesses and places of work accountable for the way that we treat us? Don't you know that unless we, on a domestic level, hold people accountable, how are we going to hold organisations accountable in our personal lives? That's just my thing. When I talk about white people, non-Black people, I want it to be clear. I'm talking as a Black woman, working whilst Black, navigating the world of work as a Black woman, right? And it just so happens that a lot of the spaces I work in are white-dominated spaces. So as Black people, we are always in the minority of the spaces that I work in. And I don't necessarily think it's It's not that I don't necessarily think. I know that it is a career thing, an organisation thing, and I think that in a lot of organisations, the people that are the main decision makers and stakeholders are not reflective of the employees that they have, or are reflective of the consultants that they have. So I find myself, and have found myself for many years, navigating white spaces, and I've done so quite successfully. But again, it boils down to what I said in the beginning of this episode. It is exhausting. And I don't want to take away from the fact that sometimes it could be quite draining. And this is why it's important that we take the annual leave, we take the breaks. We have to get to a point whereby we give ourselves grace, because dealing with white people is fucking exhausting, because they're so complicit and committed to their own ignorance that actually sometimes you find yourself questioning, so sometimes I find myself, am I being a little bit, and I have to catch myself and say, you're not being anything. By wanting to be treated like the human that you are, to be treated with respect should be something that comes as intrinsic to your humanity. Because I watch white people and how they treat each other. I watch non-black people and how they treat each other. And then I watch all these people and how they treat black people and how they treat black women. And there is definitely a fucking difference. Anyone who tells you or attempts to gaslight you is complicit in the preservation of racism. That's what I'm going to say. I'm committed to continuing doing this podcast because more than anything else, every week I am reminded the importance of this podcast. I'm reminded of the lives it's changing. I'm reminded by you black queens of how intrinsic the Toy Talks podcast is to your routine and how much you guys have learned. And equally, I've learned a lot from you guys as well, because you're causing me also to challenge my thought processes. You're causing me to open up about a lot of stuff that I've had to go through. And it's very, very cathartic for me to be able to come here and offload and tell you guys, this is how it's been. This is what I've had to do to get to where I am. Because otherwise, we end up keeping it to ourselves. And for me, there is no point me going through the things I've gone through if it isn't there to not just benefit me, but to benefit all of you. Because I don't feel like you guys should have to walk through hot water or hot coals and have to be traumatized without me giving you the heads up about what it's like, or giving you an alternative way to deal with things so that you can avoid a lot of the trauma that I've had to go through in the world of work. And then I've had to unlearn certain things. I've had to then go to therapy to deal with all of that, because I'm telling you now, there is no how you could be working in the world of work as a black woman and think that you do not need at least one therapy session, because you do. You actually do, because Oyibo people are they're fucking crazy. In the way that they behave with such impunity is fucking crazy. Okay, there's nothing sane about that, because for you to be fully committed to wanting to preserve racism, you must be fucking mad. And I will always say this, and I say this to everyone, I can't come on here every episode and say, oh, it's not every white person, it's not every non-black person, because we all know that. In the same way that I'm not going to be here to pander ever to white fragility by making that disclaimer. So as far as I am concerned, if you are sensitive to this, it's probably because you are not my audience, right? Because this podcast and the platform is for black women, to black women, about black women. So if you don't fall into that, unfortunately, you are going to get uncomfortable. Now, if you are a non-black person, but you are interested and open to learn, great, you're welcome. But I'm not going to pander to white fragility to make white people feel comfortable. I'm not going to pander to any fragility to make any non-black person feel comfortable, because in your white spaces, you do not even acknowledge us, consider that we could be feeling any type of way. And fragility is not intrinsic to a black woman's existence the way white people see us. The way white people see us is the Colin Kaepernick front cover. That's how some white people see us. We're going to get into that. So at work, there's a lot been going on, okay? And I have got about 6 episodes on different parts of work over the last few weeks. So whilst you guys have definitely been enjoying the relationship episodes and stuff, and I have so much more to come and to bring and to discuss and unpack, you know, we definitely have to also talk about the difficult stuff. So at work, so in my capacity as a commercial contract consultant, I was having a meeting with one of the suppliers. Okay. So in this meeting, there was me, the suppliers, and my colleague, who happens to be a fellow black woman. And as this supplier was talking, now he's a white man. Okay. What I would say, he's one of those guys. He reminds me of a used car salesman. Okay. It always looks like he's trying to sell me something. Good morning. In my head, I'm like, what you selling? What the fuck you want? You know, he's just irritating, okay? This supplier. So, within a contract, you have cost mechanisms. So, we call them rate cards. So, imagine if you were using a removal company. A removal company will have a rate card. So, for example, how many boxes you need will be in a rate card. If you want a certain type of lorry or van, there'd probably be a rate card for it. And it's the same way in my profession, in my contracts, I have rate cards, okay? So this supplier was talking and he said, instead of saying rate cards, he says, yeah, because I don't want to play, he goes, I don't want you to play, or I don't want you to think of the race card. What he said was so random, I was confused. I was like, why has he just said race card? And he didn't even apologize. He just corrected himself. It was just so far removed from the discussion. I didn't understand. I said, has he confused rate card to race card? And this is not the first time he's made like a joke with racial undertones. Now, I say a joke because he was finding it funny and he would have classified it as a joke, but it wasn't a joke to me. But this was the first time whereby I felt like I was being personally attacked. Because the first time he said something, I was like, okay, I'm going to note this down. Okay, put it in my burn folder. Because remember, I said to you, sometimes, you know, when white people move crazy, I don't operate on the first thing they do. Because if a person has a tendency to behave a certain way, they're going to do it again. Okay? Because that bad behavior is intrinsic to their personality. So one thing I'm going to tell you is when someone does something wrong, sometimes you have to be patient enough. And if you are dealing with racist, misogynistic, dickheads, understand that behavior will exhibit itself again. You have to almost be patient enough to wait for the pattern. And I did tell you guys that I am going to talk to you guys about like how to use your burn folder, because I think a lot of you have a burn folder and you don't know how to use it. And I definitely think it's important that I teach you guys how you use it, and with live examples of how I've used burn folders in the past and actually presently as well. So when he said that, I didn't react, because remembering this is remotely on a call and there's about 6 or 7 people on this call, and it's only me and Caroline that are the only black people on this call. Surprise, surprise. So when I come off this call, I never called Caroline straight away. And then I can't remember, either a couple of days later, Caroline had called me. And Caroline mentioned to me, she was like, you know that call where Colin was on? I was like, yeah. She goes, did you not think it was a bit weird when he said race card? It was just so random. I said, well, from one black woman to another. I found that strange too. But equally, I'm processing that. But to know that you also felt that way too allows me to know that there is something in the way I am feeling, because I didn't know whether I was reading too much into it, because at the end of the day, we were just the only black people there. So maybe, and she's like, no, I was thinking the same thing too. But equally, I see where you were coming from, Toya, because when I came off that call, I was thinking she was thinking maybe it was just her. So I was like, okay, cool. But as the days were continuing, I kind of felt like I needed to address it with that particular supplier, because remember I said to you, this is not the first time. So when I went into my burn folder, I had made notes of the first time he had made a comment about that had a racial undertone. So randomly, we was on a weekly call, and he had basically said something about black people and something about me not being, like, if he was to go in the sun, he would get burnt and I wouldn't, or something. It was just random. Again, random. But this is what I mean about the passive aggressive racism that will manifest itself in what they will call tongue-in-cheek, or what they will call a slip of the tongue. But why is it that your tongue always slips when it is violence against black people or violence against black women, specifically in the workplace? But how come your tongue doesn't slip when it's time for you to hold yourself accountable? Where's the tongue slippage? Doesn't exist. Anyway, so I called the supplier, and he was like, oh, you're right, Toya. I was like, no, not really. I said, listen, during a call on so-and-so date at so-and-so time, we were talking about XYZ in relation to the contract. And you said race card. You said that you don't want me to use, or something about me using, or you, whatever, race card. And I said, I don't understand why you said that, but that's not the first time you've said something that alludes to my race or talks about race. And it actually made me really uncomfortable. And I'm just trying to understand where that has come from. He was like, oh, I don't remember. I said, no, you do. You definitely do remember, because this is not the first time. He said, oh, yes, I remember now. He was like, oh, it was a slip of the tongue. I said, but why is it your slip of the tongue always relates to race? Oh, I'm not a racist. I says, I didn't call you a racist. I asked you, why is it that your slip of the tongue always relates to race? And I say always because I've got two examples. And actually, I might have another one. I'm still trying to decide if that had a racial undertone. I said, moving forward, I need you to be consciously present about what your tongue does. Because as a black woman working here in a very, very much white-dominated space, I already understand how this organization is set up. And you are a supplier working for this organization, so you know what I'm talking about. I said to him, as far as I am concerned, there is no such thing as a slip of the tongue in the world of work, because we are in a professional environment. Your slip of the tongue always relates to race, which is a constant reminder of my difference to you. But your slip of the tongue never attributes itself to my gender, just to my race. And actually what that does is polarize maybe what is going on in your mind, and maybe how you feel uncomfortable about doing business with a black woman. This man was quiet as a church rat. I said, have you got anything to add? He said, no, I don't. I said, all right, cool. Have a good day. Put the phone down. Now, if you had a slip of the tongue, right, you would apologise, wouldn't you? Oh, I'm so sorry. Or you would ring me up and say, listen, I said something, it was a slip of the tongue, and I was just a bit conscious that I offended you, I'm so sorry. Or in the moment that I pulled him up, he would have apologised. If it really was a quote unquote slip of the tongue. But he didn't apologise. And I put it to you that he didn't apologise because, number one, unconsciously, consciously, he has an issue with a black woman in my position telling him what to do as a supplier of the organisation that I work for. So can you see, when you're navigating the world of work, it's not just the workplace that you work in. It's often the internal and external stakeholders. If you're dealing with suppliers, Those are your external stakeholders. And believe me, I have been racially abused by external stakeholders who have then made a complaint about me for standing up for myself when I have been verbally abused. And the crux of it is because I was a black woman. Oh, that story is coming up. Oh, I got that story for you. And I understand, when I kind of had the opportunity to reflect on everything, I said to myself, I know how difficult it would be for somebody who maybe isn't as confident or is still trying to find their place in the workplace. Navigating external suppliers must be so difficult because organizations typically will believe what external supplier says over their own internal employee. And this is why I said to you, remember how I started this? Because I talk to you from the position of doing the things I tell you guys to do. So it wasn't like I had one example. Listen, I've got a burn folder, okay? And I managed to track it back to the first time he actually said something that was racial, I felt had racial undertones. And I referenced it. So if he goes back and makes a complaint or he doesn't like the way I talk, we could get into it. You know one thing about white people, they don't like to be accused of being racist, but they will accuse themselves of racism by telling you that they're not racist when you didn't call them racist. I'm just addressing your quote unquote slip of the tongue. You're telling me you're not racist. Well, I didn't say that, but since we're on the point of racism, I'm just wondering how many slip of the tongues you have with your white people or your non-black people that you work with. Why is your slip of the tongue always targeted towards black people? It's because unconsciously, consciously, you have an issue with race. You have an issue with dealing with me as a black woman. You have a problem with me being in the position I am, telling you what to do. And your unconscious consciousness basically was telling me that you are uncomfortable in dealing with me because I'm a black woman. I've been asked the question before in my DMs, do I think white people are intrinsically racist? Such a massive question. And it is a whole episode to unpack that. But if I can give some sound bites to answer that question, I'd say white people have been raised to believe and been raised to exist in a privilege that is exclusive to white people. You can have white people who have grown up around black people, but at the end of the day, white people always tapping into and pivoting to their privilege. It's not about whether white people are intrinsically racist. It's about if white people have it within them, in their nature, to call out racism when they see it. And the reality is some of them do not. So if you don't call out racism, are you complicit in racism? Yes. If you see racism and you don't call it out, and you don't use your privilege to call it out as an opportunity to either call attention to the racism, as an attempt to erase racism, as an opportunity to polarize an injustice, you are complicit in racism. That is how I'm going to answer that question. But to really truly unpack it, you need a whole damn episode, and I will give you that. And I will also say to you that we can be friends with, have family members who are non-black. But I definitely believe that there is an education that white people have to do. And they have to do it because they've been raised in privilege, in some form of elitism. They've been raised in a society that has glamorized, i.e. through the British Museum, the pillaging of artifacts that belong to the black community and belong to Africa and belong to the West Indies. So they believe that they own these things. There has to be an education that white people go through to work through some of that upbringing that is embedded in racism. And until they do the work, they will be complicit. There will be a slip of the quote unquote tongue. There will be faux pas. And there will be all of this. And one thing is that I don't understand is there are white people that will go on to certain holiday destinations and do all the research about this holiday destination. But when it comes to the difficult stuff about that country, they don't want to read it. Especially like when white people first discover Africa for the first time, you know, when they go somewhere in Africa, like Morocco, or they'll go somewhere like Nigeria, they will just get so excited. Oh, I'm going to Africa, I'm going to Africa. But they'll do all the research. They'll even tell you the intricate towns and everything. But when you ask them, have you done the research on the slave trade and the racism, and they ain't done that bit. It's like they stop at that bit. And that to me is complicit ignorance, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't really give a shit of how uncomfortable white people are. I don't care, because society has made it comfortable for you to exist in your privilege, and has made it uncomfortable for black people to just exist in our blackness. We have to justify. We have to navigate. We have to try and erode this stereotype. We're trying to tell you we are not the There is so much work that we have to do to exist as black people that white people will just never understand and never have to do. They don't have to explain themselves. They don't have to explain their hair. They don't have to explain their blackness. They don't have to explain why this is racist, why this is wrong, why this is triggering. White people live in a space of luxury. And this is the reason why I am unwilling to teach white people how to go through the journey of deconditioning or unconditioning. I'm not doing that. What I'm willing to do is go into organizations, oh yes, and make it comfortable for black and non-black people. Yeah. When I say non-black people, I mean ethnic minority. Yeah. I'm willing to do that work. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because if I do the work with these organizations, once I know that organizations are committed to the journey and the process and to change, I know I'm making it easier for my fellow black queens. I am a black woman that considers myself a black activist. 100%. I speak to black women, about black women, educate black women about how to navigate the world of work safely. So if I can go into these organizations and create safe spaces for us to navigate, that's what I'm going to do. You think I create masterclasses just to create them? No. It's so that as black women, we are given the advantage that we deserve. We are given an advantage, i.e., in terms of our CVs and presentation and buzzwords and all the things that I teach, because the advantage that I'm able to give is, as a person who has worked in organizations where I recruit, I know how the algorithms work. I understand how to market your abilities in a CV. I know how to do those things. So if I can give black queens the advantage by sharing that information on my platform, sure as hell I'm going to do it. If I talk about helping you navigate the world of work, I have to give you the tools. And this is how I see the masterclasses. It's the tools to navigate. It's the tools to navigate in terms of your CV, the tools to navigate negotiation, the tools to navigate interviews, the tools to navigate a redundancy process, the tools to navigate life. That's what I'm going to teach. I'm going to give you those things. Because no one gave it to me. I had to learn the hard way. And I'm saying, actually, you know what? It don't always have to be the hard way that we have to learn, you know. There can be ways to make learning that much easier. Before we get into this episode properly, because we're already here, I don't know if you guys saw on the Shea Borough, there's a white woman in Birmingham and she was trying to get into a club, and there was a bouncer being very respectful doing his job. This white woman decided to call him the N-word, decided to call him all types of names under the sun, and then attempted to spit on him. And what we don't see is anybody coming to his defense, but he has since gone on to Shea Borough or gone on to social media and said, actually, people were trying to defend me. Clearly, that wasn't captured in the whole 2 minutes of what I saw, but okay. I just want to read you the statement that this white woman, her name is Shana Walker. I'm going to read you the statement that she put out there. I would just like to publicly apologise for the situation that happened at the club. And I would like everyone to know that I am in fact not racist at all. I have several black co-workers who I love dearly and have even dated black men. What? So you have black co-workers and you've dated black men? When you call a black person an N-word, you surely ain't racist. Are you stupid and dumb? Okay, let me just read on. I was seriously drunk out of my head that night and upset because I wanted to get into the club and into the lounge when I had left my ID in the car, which was parked over a mile away. I was in my heels and couldn't, you know what, I'm not even reading the rest of it. Let me just say something. Even within the first 2 sentences, can you see what I mean about some white people find it so difficult to apologise? Where is the apology for the black man that you insulted, humiliated, you racially abused him? Where is the apology to him for that? Why is it that white people make excuses for their behaviour? It was a slip of the tongue. I was drunk. I have black friends. Let me tell you something, dear white people. If you know me and you consider me your friend, I'm not your fucking excuse for your madness. Because if I find out you're crazy and you'll be doing all that racist shit, I'm going to call you out publicly. Don't you ever use me, a black woman, as an excuse to absolve you from being racist. If you racist, you racist. Imagine being this girl's black co-worker, hearing her, seeing all that she done, and then being the co-worker that you use as the reason why you are not racist. Are you fucking mad? Are you crazy? She is a racist. She is a disgusting, deplorable human being. And listen, alcohol brings out the true nature of who you were. So you really, listen, the way she reached for the N-word is like, that was part of her vocabulary. Okay, it was part of her vocab. She's used to saying them things. And this is what I'm saying. We need to start holding people accountable. It is, do you know what? It's disrespectful to use alcohol as an excuse as the reason why you're a racist. Imagine being a racist, using the N-word, calling them every black this, all under the sun. Imagine then using alcohol as the reason. Put some respect on my blackness. I'm not even going to read the rest of her statement because it's making me fucking angry. So, let's talk about Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick and his book. So, I'm not going to sit here and act like I haven't actually thought about whether his book cover was a ploy, like a publicity ploy to get us to talk about his book. But the problem is, it's the idea that a mixed race man thinks it's okay to reach for a black woman and center us in your agenda violently, viciously, and aggressively. Because that is what I see when I look at that cover. I want us to also take a minute here. The reason why I have informed you guys, if you didn't know, that he's a mixed race man, is because there is a privilege that mixed race people have, okay? And it's their proximity. So where you have a mixed race person, where a person is mixed with white, the proximity to their whiteness is the privilege. Do you understand? A mixed race person's experience in the world of work and life is very different to a black person's experience. And this is why I talk about it. Because for a long time, I used to consider mixed race people as black. Because a lot of mixed race people that I know consider themselves as black. And whilst you can consider yourself whatever you like, the reality is, and now I've educated myself, I know for a fact that that's because it comes from a place of, as black women, as a black woman, I've always seen it as, and this is how society has also depicted it, is that we are always caping. But the reality is, when I've done a sense check and I've done an audit check on myself and on allies, there's not many people that cape for us in the way that we cape for them. Do you understand? And equally as well, we are so quick to label people who may not even identify as black, but we're so quick to label people black. And I had to look at myself and ask myself the reason why. Like Meghan Markle, if you had asked me a couple of years ago, I would have told you Meghan Markle was a black woman. But Meghan Markle has never considered, used, or identifies as a black woman. She identifies as a biracial woman, a mixed race woman. That's how she identifies. Do you understand? So I think we as black women need to do that work too. We need to ask ourselves, why are we so quick to consider, label, or agree with the identification of a mixed race or biracial person as black? Why do we do that? Because I used to do that all the time. And I know that that's the wrong thing to do. Because that person is biracial or mixed race. I have other friends who consider themselves as biracial or mixed race. And they will tell you that. If you were to call them a black person, they'll correct you. When I look at this cover, what I see is that Colin Kaepernick has really allowed himself he's really allowed himself to overstep, cross the line. But equally, we as Black people need to hold ourselves accountable for who we call heroes, or who we make heroes, or who we allow to center themselves in Black issues. When Colin Kaepernick took the knee, it was very noble. Let's not take away from the conversations that were had. But my question to you is, as a result of taking the knee, outside of conversations, what has really changed? Because when I'm talking to, our American brothers and sisters, especially our American sisters, what they be telling me is nothing's changed. And the reason why we need to talk about it here on the podcast is because usually what happens in America finds its way over here to the UK. And it's important that we learn lessons from what's happening outside of the UK. Because Colin Kaepernick in this one picture has used every stereotype that has been attributed to us as Black women as a imagery and as a branding tool on his book. And amidst calls to take the book down, but remove the cover, this man has been silent. This man has been disrespectful in his silence. He hasn't even acknowledged nobody. And my question to Colin Kaepernick is, why didn't you center a Black man in your cause of the abolition of, abolition for the people, the movement for a future without policing and prisons? Why don't you polarize a Black man? Why didn't you even put yourself on the cover, on your knee? Why didn't you do that? Why have you put a Black woman there looking angry like this? Why have you done that? And then in my head, I'm thinking, the way police brutality is in the States, the violence of police brutality, we have examples. Breonna Taylor, for example, who was subjected to a death that can only ever be described as murder. We know how the police view Black women in the States. So then why would you put a future without policing and prisons and then make Black women the centerfold of that? Because if we know how Black women are treated in the States, if we know how little police regard lives of Black women, why would you make that the forefront of your mission on your book? Why would you do that? Because these white officers are going to see this cover of the book and pull over a Black woman, and they're going to see that the forefront of this campaign is Black women. That's not our campaign. That's not Black women's campaign in the States. That's not what I'm hearing. That's not what I'm seeing. I can't believe that Colin Kaepernick, having taken a knee, having done something that was so polarized all over the world, opening up conversation, would then be so reckless as to center Black women in the way he has done on this cover. And what bugs me, what troubles me, what to me is unacceptable is how this man thinks it's okay to place Black women on the front line of sacrifice. Black women are supposed to take the bullets. Black women are supposed to lead the struggle. Black women are supposed to do this. And my question is, why? Why are you so willing to reach for a Black woman at the center of this, but you won't reach for a Black man? You won't even reach for yourself. In fact, Colin Kaepernick, being a biracial man, having proximity to privilege, I would have expected him to put himself here. Because clearly you can speak to a certain demographic better than we could, because your proximity to that privilege allows you and affords you the opportunity to enter those rooms to have them conversations. But you know the struggles, or at least you're aware of the struggles of a Black woman. You must be aware. Why would you put Black women, why would you put us in a vulnerable position as to place us at the forefront of your agenda by putting us on the front cover of your book? Why did you do that? This man has done it with such impunity. He ain't said shit. He has a biracial girlfriend. He didn't want to put her there. He didn't want to put her there. He wanted to put us. Now, can you understand when that organisation has now reached out to me? Remember the one I told you about? How they've put a black girl on their press release for Black Lives Matter. Can you see why I was now so triggered by that? I was triggered. Black women, for me, I speak for myself as a black woman, I'm tired of being on the front line of your agendas. I'm tired of you not picking us. I'm tired of you using us as a sacrifice, because we've got, as black women, we have other fights that we're fighting, and I don't see you at the forefront of those fights. This leads me to say this. I get a lot of dilemmas. I get a lot of people that reach out to me. And I remember not too long ago, I had a black woman that reached out to me, and effectively what she wanted to do is make a complaint on behalf of her whole team. And I said to her, and I went back to that email, and I said to her, do not make yourself the sacrificial lamb in trying to draw attention to the injustice that your team has gone through. Why are you the one on the front line of that? Why? I said, why does it have to come from you? I said, you've told me you have 6 white people, and out of all that 6 white people, not one of them wants to be the one at the forefront to do this complaint. Everyone has pushed you to the front. And this is what happens in the world of work. We are so used to being the cape, of putting our capes on and avenging for all, that we don't even avenge for ourselves. But we're so used to being the sacrifice that we don't even fight for ourselves. We're too busy fighting for everybody else. Let me tell you something. You see, with me in the workplace, I love black women. They'll tell you. I love working with my fellow black sisters, because there is something when you know you're working with somebody who is like you, because remember, we have a podcast episode where I told you not all skin folk is kinfolk, and you have to develop discernment. I've told you guys. But when you work in and amongst people who you know are on code, there is a unity you feel. There is a understanding that you have. And that's amazing. However, you need to be strategic in how you operate, even with your fellow black sisters. You've got to be strategic, because remember, you're still operating as who you are in the workplace. I remember when a young lady at the Toy Talks Live in 2018, and she was telling me about what was going on in her workplace, and I and she'd asked the question from the audience, and I said to her, you don't put yourself as a sacrifice. You don't sacrifice yourself. So I've always been conscious about the fact that people are so willing to throw us to the front. And my question is, why is it they don't throw their arms around us to protect us? As a black woman in the world of work, I know that the only person that was ever protecting me was me. I never had no black men where I've worked ever protect me. White people sure as hell ain't protecting me. HR, you could sing like a canary. They ain't protecting you. In the world of work, the reason why I go on and on about your burn folder is because your burn folder, at the end of the day, is what is going to be your covering. You are going to be able to have a burn folder that you have collected to be able to protect you if you have to use it to protect yourself. Do you understand? Because I recognized very early on in my career that in the world of work, it can be very, very lonely. Very lonely. Because at the end of the day, everybody's trying to get paid. Listen, this good friend you're working with in the workplace, you're only brought together because of the world of work. Listen, when they're ready to make you redundant, they're going to call you into the room. When they're ready to put someone in disciplinary, they're going to put you in the room. So you have to also be centering yourself in how you protect yourself in the world of work. Your feedback folder, your protection. Your burn folder, your protection. Your objectives, your protection. Your strategy, your protection. Doing your due diligence is your protection. Because in the world of work, we are very exposed as black women. Extremely exposed. And I'll tell you the reason why we're exposed. Because we are the minority. Being a minority in the world of work leaves you exposed. So you need to get with the program and start figuring out a way to protect yourself. I figured that out. I figured it out. I am the subject matter expert. That's how I protect myself. I've got a feedback folder. That's how I protect myself. And the list goes on. Some of you really be thinking I'm coming here every week just to say all these things, just to say it. You know, it's funny. My fiance said to me today, because he knows how tired I was, he says, what would happen if you didn't do an episode? I says, what do you mean? He goes, what would happen if you didn't do an episode of the Toy Talks podcast this week? I said, that can't happen. That can't happen. Because my black sisters know I'm going to show up for them. My black sisters know I'm going to show up for them every Tuesday. I can't let them down. I understand that the podcast is your protection. I understand that the podcast, the things that I share, protects you by giving you and arming you with the knowledge to be able then to use it in the world of work. Do you think I'm stupid? I'm not. You think I don't go through stuff? I do. But I'm saying, I take my role as a black woman with a platform like this very seriously. I take it extremely seriously. Because the world of work is extremely serious. Some of us have no choice. We have to work to pay the bills. Some of us are trying to forge careers for ourselves. Some of us are walking in the wilderness trying to figure out work and life. So I understand that when God says, you have to walk this journey, Toya, all these pains that you have been through, you had to go through it because I needed you to create a safe space for black women so that you can share with them the gems. So that other successful black women will come too. They need to come through. They need to come through because let me tell you something. Not every one of us are going to have the luxury of working for ourselves, you know. Not every one of us are going to have the luxury of being a social media influencer making money. Some of us have to do a 9 to 5. Some of us have to work. But you know what? Being able to do a 9 to 5 and understand the strategy of how to survive through a 9 to 5, now that's a skill. Holding on to a job is a skill. Forging a career for yourself is a skill. And let me tell you something. I never, ever, ever had to crush another person or lick ass to get to where I have been. Or get to where I'm going. I've never had to, and I'm not doing it. I'm so sorry. You see me? I can't. I will get to where I am supposed to be by my merit alone. By my merit, I will get there. This is why I say to you guys, you have to be a subject matter expert in whatever it is that you do. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a nurse, whether you are a retail assistant, whether you're a retail manager, whether you are an economist, or whether you're a receptionist, or whether you're an accountant, whatever it is, you have to be a subject matter expert because, again, that becomes your covering. That becomes your tool. That becomes your value add. Do you understand? I had that episode very early on in the podcast. Your boss is not the key to your success. Go back and listen to it. Go back and listen to it. Some people will email me, oh, Toya, have you spoken about this? Have you spoken? I'm like, don't insult me. Like, take the time to receive what I'm telling you in this podcast because let me tell you something. You guys know I've walked through the valley of the shadow of fearing no evil. I've been through hell to be able to sit here every Tuesday. Understand I've been through hell in my life. Understand I've had to walk and work through that trauma. And yet, every morning, like the rest of you, I get up and I go to work. I'm still having to deal with these white people. But the difference is I'm navigating them differently. I'm navigating them differently. Imagine you can go to somewhere and work somewhere. They don't even acknowledge you. Imagine everyone's introducing themselves. They will skip past your name. That was me. Where I am now, that was me. Imagine being in a meeting full of, there's 5 people, all white people. And they will go around introducing themselves. Before you have a chance to say your name, okay, at item agenda 1, they just ignored me like I wasn't there. They made me feel like a small crumb. You think I don't have feelings? I sure as well have feelings, but I'm not going to let a white man, a white woman, a non-black person see me in my feelings. No. We're going to do this professionally. You want to ignore me? No problem. You will see me. And I will turn up to that meeting every week. And every week you're going to ignore me. Every week I'm going to turn up until you have no choice. And then when you do realize that I'm here, we're going to work on my rules. We're going to work to my tune. And that's what's happening now. They know. When it comes to me, don't try me. No. You're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. Colin Kaepernick and his book cover are dangerous. But we also have to take responsibility. When you don't do your due diligence on these allies, when you don't, and you're just excited because they're talking for us and they're using their mouth as our mouthpiece, you don't understand when you allow them to do these things without your due diligence. You give them a license to feel that they can come out with a cover like this. This will happen. The license. This Colin Kaepernick didn't put himself on the cover. He didn't put a black man on the cover, and he sure as hell didn't put a biracial woman on the cover. He didn't put a white woman on the cover either. He put a black woman on the cover. I don't give a damn what anyone says to me. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee polarized the conversation that transcended globally. But he also made a lot of money with that. His endorsement deal with Nike made him millions. Let's just get this right. But my question is, and then what? Where was the sustainable change? What else happened? When allies decide to polarize themselves and center themselves in our fight, our discussions, you have to also ask yourself, why are they doing that? We don't do enough due diligence about how people access our community and how people access our platforms. We don't do that. We just see someone talking for us and we're just so happy as if we don't have voices ourselves. I don't need anyone to advocate for me. I can advocate for myself. I tell everybody, I advocate for myself as a black woman. I'm not sitting here saying I advocate for black women. I advocate as a black woman about my experiences. It's not my job to advocate for every black woman. No. I can advocate for my experiences and what I've been through. And if you identify with what I'm advocating about, let's talk about it together. Let's create a space. But I'm about sustainable change. I'm about forward thinking. I'm about thinking about the generation after us and the current generation too. I take my responsibilities as a black woman with this type of platform seriously. That's why I tell you, I don't work with every brand. And you better believe that people are running up in my DMs and sending me emails wanting to work with me. But if you're problematic, you can't see me. Sorry. Because I'm not going to erode years of work just for a paycheck so that you can use me as your token black woman. You're mad. One organisation reached out to me. They wanted to work with me. I had a consultation with them, and you know I pay for you have to pay for consultation. Sorry, that's my time, and I place value on my time you're paying. I did a strategic roadmap for this organisation. I spent hours doing it. Do you know I never heard back from the company again? Yes! Because you wanted to use me as your token. You wasn't willing to do the work. You wanted to put yourself and center yourself as an ally to the activism of black women and polarizing black women in spaces where we have been oppressed. But you wanted to use me as a token. You didn't want to go on the journey. So you wasn't looking for longevity. You wasn't looking for change and sustainable change. You was looking for in the moment. You were performative in the Black Lives Matter movement last summer, and you were trying to ride the wave. Because then they tried to ask me if they could do a press release with my name. I said, you can't do that because you ain't done nothing. I haven't seen any commitment or any buy-in from your senior stakeholders, your senior management, your board members. I've not seen any buy-in. So what is it that you're trying to say I'm going to do if I ain't done it? No, don't put my name there. I said, if you put my name there, I'll do a retraction. You will do a retraction, sorry. Not me. When allies, quote unquote, are too quick to put us on the front line of the fire, I've got a problem with you. Why can't you put yourself on the front line of the fire? Why must it be us as black women that you're willing to sacrifice? I will suspect you. What are you doing? What is your intention? What is your motive? What are you getting out of this? Colin Kaepernick's book markets violence. It does. Because these ignorant white officers in America, some of them didn't even sit two GCSEs, will only see the cover, and it will only see without policing and prisons. It won't see anything else. Maybe part of Colin Kaepernick's marketing strategy was to do just this. But it's the fact that you're willing to trigger black women in order to have this conversation. That's my problem with you. I was reading an article and it said, it was exploring the question, is Colin Kaepernick being mixed race? Does it play into kind of his decision to have a book cover like this? And I would say, yeah, it does. It does. And I'll tell you why it does. When I read up a bit more about Colin Kaepernick and how he grew up, he's a biracial mixed race man who was adopted by a white family. So he grew up in a white family. He grew up in that privilege. Do you understand? Twice. And he has made strides and steps to understand his mixed heritage, to understand the black side of his family, and understand, kind of the history of black people. He's done all of that. But he's done all of that from a place of privilege. This isn't about being tone deaf, because what I don't want to do is give him an escape of, or absolve him of responsibility of what he's done here. He's very consciously done this because the cover remains on his social media the last time I checked. And his team found themselves on Clubhouse gaslighting everybody. So you knew they were doing that shit. When are we going to hold people accountable for the violence that they uphold towards black women? When are we going to do that? As a black woman myself, I feel very triggered. As a black woman myself, when I look at this, I feel like I'm going to have to explain this to young black princesses coming up. Because this is, society depicts us as angry black women. Like to say there's not angry white women. But why is it that the anger is so intertwined with aggression and violence? Why can't black women just be angry and be angry as a state of emotion, the same way white people are? That's because they erase the humanity from black women. And that in itself is violence, because what you do is you center us then in the result of the negativity that white people then have towards black women. And we see it all the time. We see it all the time. The way white people in the world of work treat black women is very different to the way they treat black men. And I have had to go through a period of educating the black men around me about that. I've had to, because I think they take for granted the fact that black men navigate also from a state of masculine privilege that black women don't have. The stereotype about black women is, put it this way, Cindy in my workplace, you know, she's a busybody, the martyr. We've got an episode about her as well. Recently, that one, the story on her is much, yeah? But I digress. She's an Asian woman. So again, this Bane melting pot business, you guys know I don't believe in it. But again, in the world of working in life, Asian women are chosen above black women anyway, because we know that as black women, we're seen as at the bottom of the pecking order. That's how they treat us. That's how they see us. So I was on the phone with her. She was talking. And I say phone, I mean remotely, sorry. Not Zoom, Teams. And she started crying. The way she reached for them tears, I was confused. And in that moment that she was crying, I thought to myself, any other race sitting in front of you and you cry, they would console you and empathise. But I am not afforded that as a black woman. I am not afforded the empathy that you as an Asian woman are. And I'm not going to afford you that empathy right now, because I have been conditioned to not show emotion in the world of work, because my emotions are not acknowledged. I am not seen. I am trampled over, and they try to oppress me. So I can't reach for my emotions the way you need it. And I'm going to need you to stop crying, because what you're crying about don't make sense, because you are crying from a position of privilege. These are all the things that are going through my head. But as on a human level, I had to be like, don't worry, it's going to be fine. But in my head, I just was like, I have never been able to cry in the office. I cry in the toilet, but I couldn't cry in the office. Because I know that my tears don't do anything. Imagine knowing that you are so upset that you display your upset in tears, but it has no effect. But then your white counterpart, a white female, will cry and everybody's running. Kleenex tissues are flying. People are bending on the floor to come and catch your tears. Wow. Dear white women, you live a very privileged existence. Very. And this is why I'm so passionate about talking about this cover by edited by Colin Kaepernick, commissioned by him, paid for by him, promoted by him. I've got to talk about it. I want you and I to be open and frank. That's why I have this podcast. I want you to learn. That's why I have this podcast. But equally, there are going to be things that are happening in the media that I know that are going to be intrinsic to our learning as we navigate the world of work and life. And I'm going to bring it here to the podcast because I want to invoke conversation. I want us to also understand how society has placed black women and therefore how that transfers into the workplace. But the white structures that are built to oppress us, we have to navigate through. And sometimes it is exhausting. And sometimes you just want to give up. And sometimes you're like, you know what, I'm not doing this. But you have to do it because every day you have to turn up. You have to get paid. This is what I say to you. You have to turn up with strategy. You can't just go in a workplace and just, I'm there for the money. I don't believe in that shit. Because listen, money isn't everything, you know. Money is something. Let me not, try and make you think that ain't important. But when you're in the trenches of dealing with bullshit from non-black people, from white people, when you are in the trenches being disrespected, you ain't thinking about the money you're making. You're not. You're thinking about, I'm just trying to work here. I'm just trying to be successful here. You ain't thinking about the money. So you damn well better get a strategy. Because I'm telling you right now, when I started seeing my career as a project and then I started strategizing about what I wanted to achieve in my career, that made it more of an investment for me to understand how to navigate without selling myself, my personality, without compromising who I was, because I always knew I had a strategy. I did my due diligence. Sometimes I would be very slow to react. Very slow. Because one thing I know about white people is they're always going to show up as themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? They are. Because if as a white person, you have been raised in privilege, your existence is always seen as a privilege, you're going to show up as none other than yourself, because it's like, you are existing from the pulpit of privilege. So I trust white people to be themselves. I do. And the blueprint isn't different. It is the same wherever you go. It's just the way in which they weaponize their whiteness is different. The way they weaponize it is different. But it's still the whiteness that they're coming with the violence. Do you understand? Black women, please stop using yourself and allowing yourself to be used on the front line of sacrifice. In the world of work, when they're doing collective campaigns, you will see the black women there. When they are doing activism, that's when they want to find us. But when it's time to talk about Black Lives Matter, crickets, or they will just have a standard statement. How can a company release a standard statement without even addressing Black Lives Matter in the workplace? They won't say anything to you. They won't talk about it. Or if they do, they skirt around the issue. Oh, we saw what happened in America. It was unfortunate. What happened in America that was unfortunate? Tell us. Talk about it. They don't want to do that. Then they'll release a statement and you'll just be thinking, but we ain't spoke about this. You haven't asked us collectively as black people how this has affected us. You haven't had the conversation, because white people are not ready. Some of them are not ready to confront the ancestral commitments their ancestors made to racism. They are not ready to talk about how complicit they are in their racism and privilege. They don't want to talk about fragility. They don't want to talk about elitism, hierarchy. They don't want to talk about them things, because then you start to shake the foundations of privilege and racism that they need to protect to exist. We need to start being on code, because some of us aren't on code. Some of us aren't on code. Not on code at all. Some of us think everybody's equal. They don't treat us like that. They don't treat us like that. So if they don't treat us like that, and we know things are not equal, you have to start now, go back to the drawing board and figure out your strategy. That's what you have to do. Don't come here, listen to 1-2 podcasts, and think, oh, right, I know what to do. You have to listen to every episode of the Toy Talks podcast. You must listen to. You've got to. Because I've invested the time to teach and educate and give you the tools to navigate. You don't have an excuse. I've even got a dilemma section where you can email me. So there ain't any excuses. You guys know I never tell you something to do that I ain't done. I never paint a perfect picture, because work and life is not perfect. What I will be is an example of how, when you become a subject matter expert, when you navigate, when you're strategic, when you do your due diligence, when you have your feedback, burn folders, when you have your objectives, when you are serious about what you're trying to obtain, let me be the example that you can get it. Let me be the example. Let me be the example. Because I've seen money in a level where I never thought existed. I've seen positions that I didn't think I could ever be, because of the way I have been treated through my journey in my career and the world of work. So my thing is this: if I'm going to create this safe place as a platform for us to teach, share, open and share the tools, then all I ask you to do is open your hearts and minds to receive what I'm saying and put into action. That is all I ask of you. That's it. Colin Kaepernick is problematic. Yeah? And what I would like to see is what happens as a result of the uproar about the front cover. Is he going to retract it? Is he going to redo it? Is he going to apologise? It's not often I see people apologise to black women. But I personally, I need an explanation. I need to know the thought process on how he allowed this to happen, how he commissioned and approved this. And then I want black people to hold him accountable. It's all right when they're using our shoulders to benefit from our causes. But when it's time to show up for us and really show up for us, and if they fall, apologize to us, that's really slow. Or sometimes it just doesn't happen. So I thought it was really important that I come on here and talk about Colin Kaepernick and the front cover of his book. And I know there's some people that probably don't even know who he is or this book or whatever. But I felt that it would lend itself to us as black women and how we're used as a sacrifice, or sometimes we allow ourselves to be used as sacrifice in the world of work. And I definitely felt like the conversation lent itself to us being very aware of the power of black women as well, and often the negative stereotypes that are painted of us, and actually the importance as black women of us understanding how we need to navigate work and life and hold people accountable for the stereotypes they portray of us. It's important that we also hold ourselves accountable for the people we call heroes. We need to hold ourselves accountable for the people we are so willing to call our allies. A young black queen reached out to me and she sent me a DM, and I really wanted to read it to you guys. Hi Toya, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Just wanted to reach out and tell you how grateful I am for your platform. It's been such a blessing. I've binged on every episode and bought 2 masterclasses, the CV and the interview masterclass. When I was listening to your masterclass, I was in a job that was really affecting my mental health. I had no work-life balance and eventually decided to leave. Your masterclasses have helped me secure a new job, and I negotiated my salary, something I've never done before, and I now earn £13,000 more than my previous job. Something I never thought that would be possible if I didn't have access to your platform. So thank you. May God bless you tenfold. I thought that was such a beautiful message, and I did respond to her because hearing from you guys is equally as important as well, I think, in understanding how you use the Toy Talks platform, but also how it's changing your lives. And I was speaking to my fiance and I read it to him, and he was like, wow, that is absolutely amazing. He's like, Toya, your platform is really changing and transforming women's lives, black women's lives as they navigate work. And I said to him, yes, but also as well, you know, as black people and specifically black women, we are complicit sometimes in how white people seek to oppress us. What do I mean by that? Do you know we are conditioned to not share what we earn? We are conditioned to not do that, so that we can continue to be at the lower end of the scale when we look at pay brackets and how much we are paid. So if we are not talking about our salary, then organisations don't have to be competitive. If they don't have to be competitive, then they continue to oppress us. And therefore, when we're comparing how much we earn to, say, our black men, we're not on par with them. In fact, in organisations, black people are paid the lowest. And statistics has shown that black women are not often paid on the same level as their female or male white counterparts. So it is so important for us to develop the skill of discussing money and negotiating money. And I'm not saying go and tell your colleague how much you earn, but what you should be able to do is understand the skills to be able to negotiate and understand that you can negotiate. You can't be asking permission from a white person who's committed to oppressing you for permission to negotiate your salary. So I've created a masterclass, the negotiation masterclass, to teach you the skill of negotiation so that you understand that it's more than just, I want this amount. Understanding the work that goes behind negotiating, what you have to do to be able to negotiate from a place of strength that we call leverage. Understanding your bargaining, Understanding what your walk away point is. And walk away doesn't necessarily mean walk away from the job. It means the minimum amount that you're willing to accept. But it has to be based on something. Anybody who has negotiated anything and you haven't done the research as to what you're negotiating, you've usually done yourself out of earning more money. So I've developed this masterclass because I negotiate everything. Every salary, everything, I negotiate everything. I have to. Because I know that what they're offering me isn't competitive. If we know that black people and black women are not represented in organisations, why do you think they're going to offer you the fairest amount of money? Why? They're not going to. They're going to get you the cheapest rate. They're going to attempt to undervalue you, even though they know they need you, but they value your skill, but not enough to pay you what you deserve. So why am I then expecting them to offer me what I deserve? And then I accept this money, right? Because, gratefulness and imposter syndrome and the rest of it, only to find out that doing blood, sweat and tears, that a member of staff who is anyone other than a black woman is earning more than me, but I'm putting more work and more time and more hours into the job. There's nothing worse of a feeling. So I have then created a masterclass that will teach you how to do it, how to negotiate. You don't have to be the best talker in the world. You don't have to be a mathematician to understand where your position of negotiation should start from. I've given you the tools. So do you remember what I said to you? When I am giving you the tools, I'm teaching you the tools. I'm giving you something that's sustainable. I'm giving you a skill set. I'm teaching you a skill set. You have to commit to walk down that journey to understand that I deserve more. You have to give yourself permission to want more for yourself than what white people tell us that we deserve. God forbid that a white person will tell me what I deserve. I will decide what I deserve, and I will negotiate what I deserve, and I will get what I deserve. And that needs to be the premise of your negotiation. Understanding how you place value on your skill set. An organisation will never give you what you're worth. Nope, because your skills are priceless. But an organisation needs to give you what you deserve. And you need to be in a position to feel comfortable enough to request and negotiate what you deserve. And we have the negotiation masterclass on toyatalks.com. Right, I'm going to leave it there. Next week's episode, or the week after, I am going to speak about blue therapy because I know how much you guys love the relationships topics that I talk about on the Toya Talks podcast. So I have a couple more. I'm trying to get my fiance to come on and talk about relationships as well. I'm trying, so please pray for me because he's come on the podcast before, but podcasting is not for everybody, and also I have to make him feel comfortable, and he is very, 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 very private. So I'm working on it. But if you don't know what blue therapy is, then I suggest you go on Trend Central on YouTube, go and have a look, and we're going to talk about it, break it down. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining me for this week's episode of the Toya Talks podcast. Make sure you share this episode or share previous episodes of the Toya Talks podcast with your family, your friends, or whoever you think that can benefit from the Toya Talks podcast platform. Make sure if you want to keep abreast of all the things that are Toya Talks related, you follow the website, www.toyatalks.com, which also houses the masterclasses. Make sure that you follow me on social media. My personal social media is Toya_Washington, or follow me on the Toya Talks Instagram page, which is Toya_Talks. Of course, you know that you can follow me on Snapchat, which is Toya Washington, all one word. Follow me on Clubhouse, which is Toya Washington, all one word. We also have a club called Toya Talks. Also, I'm on Twitter, Toya_Talks with the hashtag Toya Talks or the hashtag Toya Talks podcast. Make sure if you have a work-related dilemma, or maybe you have a relationship dilemma and you feel like I am the person that is best placed to give you some advice, make sure you email us here at hello@toyatalks.com. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me for this week's episode of the Toya Talks podcast. Make sure you tune in next week, Tuesday, for a brand new episode of the Toya Talks podcast. I want to wish you all an amazing week. Self-care, give yourself grace. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to take some time out. Anyway, guys, until next week, my name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.